Welcome to what might prove to be the last couple of works on the diner. We're almost getting to the point where we just have like one window left to paint. Um, we're probably going to put some of the pavement in today, but I'd say we have maybe one or two episodes left. And I think we've gone a long way from the beginning pencil. I think we actually have a pretty good looking diner. Um, Tonight I'm going to work on the final window. I'm going to actually put in some of the metal fleshing that's on top of this window. But we really want to get that last window in today. That's what we really want to focus on. So here we go. The last window, according to my photograph, didn't have much visible from the outside. It was just really a black open space with the word open in the middle of it in red. So what we're going to do today is darken the window. We're using Payne's gray. We're not using black for reasons I spoke before. We never use black on any painting. Black is just a little bit too dark. It just completely darkens the entire image. You're much better off using something like a Payne's gray, which is really a dark, dark gray. What we're going to do now is do that last window. If you notice, the bricks were done ahead of time. The bricking is such a boring, monotonous piece of work. I thought I'd spare the audience watching me paint brick upon brick upon brick. It is really a monotonous thing to watch. Almost as monotonous as it is actually putting bricks in. I did that when I was about 14 years old. I helped a neighborhood builder, and for one summer, me and a couple other guys gathered bricks to help this guy, and let me tell you, that was monotony. It was a long and tedious summer day. It was fun, though, to watch what would happen as a result of getting all these bricks piled up into one working order. So, in one sense, it was fun. Now, a little bit of dark. We're going to put the actual light reflecting here is more of a dark blue. So what we're going to do is paint around it for now. And I'll put the blue in once I'm referring all to the photograph I took from the street. I drove by one day and I took several photographs, which is all I'm going to use as reference. I'm not going to use anything else like my memory, which is, let's face it, memory is a great thing, a great asset, but when it comes to painting a structure, you're better off having a real good photograph. Or standing in front of the building, which in this case would not be very good. It'd be West Main Street in Plainville, and chances are I'd get run over. Traffic would not stop for me. Besides, this is better. I always say it's much better to work at a piece of art at your leisure in a well-lit studio as opposed to doing it live on the scene. Sometimes there's a lot of danger involved with that. I know a lot of people are fresh air painters, swear by it, but given my druthers, I'd rather work in the confines of a studio. Thank you. Less danger. I don't like fighting off bugs or any other nature. This is better. This is preferable. I'm going to put the black in, the Payne's gray. Now, the other point I have to make, really, this is just one coat. I'm probably going to put 2 or 3 coats of the Payne's gray in, only because you're painting on a white surface. One coat is really not going to do the job. What you do need is probably a second coat or a third coat just to solidify the whole proceeding. And it does make a difference, but you don't do it you can almost see through a lot of your hard work. That's why everything you see on here is, it's 2 or 3 coats of paint, not one. Good paintings never are 1 or 2 coats. Watercolor you get away with, that almost has a transparent feel to it. But that's about the only genre I could think of that would involve a minimal amount of paint. Pastel to a degree because it's always fading away. But oil or acrylics, which are my 2 favorite mediums, you really have to make sure that it stands up. And you do on occasion go with more than 1 layer of paint. The depth's what's important, and you want depth to really happen. I'm going to go to a smaller brush for some of the detail work. I'm just saying that sometimes you really want to make a fine little line, and a large brush will fail you. Again, Payne's Gray. I like to use a 50% pigmentation to a 50% water. I don't use anything but that. You'll never see me using some of the other things that are out there, extenders, what have you. I don't like what they do to the nature of color. I want the color to be true. So I stress color, a little bit of water to make it fluid, and that's it. Now I'm going to do all the dark around the word open. We'll put the red in after. Good thing to do it this way. That way when you put the red in, you could always make corrections if they are needed. Probably will be. You could do it any other way. You could do the red first and correct it with the black. There's no really pure way of doing it. And I hate people that say this is the only way to do it. Trust me. There's 1,000 ways. You could start by putting the red in first and putting the black around it. There's a million options. Don't limit yourself. That's why I really don't like instruction books on painting. Ideally, you shouldn't have to follow a manual when it comes to painting. A lot of it should be intuitive. You should have the option of making last-minute changes. When you adhere to a book, you're almost afraid to make the option of changes, and that's wrong. Art should be something that's constantly evolving, not delegated to a certain set of rules. Okay, I'm going to sneak myself between the letters O and P, put a little dark in there. Try to make that as straight as possible. Now we have a problem here because the letter open, there's a sign, a little part of the window that goes in between that. The trick is going to be, we're going to involve color more than anything else. And we'll get by having a little bit of subterfuge. Color is going to act as a intermediate, but it's not going to affect it too much. It's going to be subtle, as it should be. If it was just one direct color used more than once, that would act as an agent that could be confusing. But this, it's subtle. It won't be too much of a distraction. Kind of interesting. This little thing here is kind of a blue little box, and it's in the background, so you really don't see much of it. I'm going to paint the Payne's Gray around it. It's got a nice approaching what could very well be the end of a project. I always imagined someday painting this diner, even when I was about 10 years old. So it's kind of neat to actually live up to that. I always loved diners, and to me it was like a little miniature Disneyland. The colors, the architecture of it. And here I am many years later actually doing it. Kind of nice to live up to your childhood fantasies. It's rare, but once in a while you can do it. Not much of a ambition, but it's nice to achieve whatever you can. And to me, a diner was a great place. So we're going to put the blue in. It's kind of a glowish blue. It's not going to be very garish. It's going to be subtle. But we're going to put that in last. We're going to let the black dry a bit before we do that. Otherwise, you run the risk of having it all blend and become mucky. This is going to be better. We're also going to finish the word open. Same way, we'll put the black in first. The glass casement that's here. Remember I said we're going to get away by simply putting a different color around it. It should work. Now comes the tough part. I'm going to put the upper part of the letter P in. We could rectify this later when I put red in. I'll correct the any mistake I make with the black. If I make a mistake. I might not, so let's see if I'm lucky. Now, we're going to bring this down, finish the P, and we're done. The OP part of the word open is going to be working nice. We're going to wait till the black dries a bit before I put the red in. Could have done it the opposite. I could put the red in first and waited for it to dry. There's no reason I'm doing it this way at all. Just happened to be the way it progressed today, and no logic to it, no rhyme or reason. We're going to go back into this, make that glass casement a little bit more finite. Again, we're going to go back over it, more color, fix it if there is a little bit of unevenness to it. Also going to do the metal flashing above. I have shiny metal paint, which is going to be great. Now, two options. Let's say there is no color in the bottom of this. There's a little bit of a white line, which I purposely left intact by just not painting it. We're going to fill out the dark part of this. Perfect. Now, let's get the bottom of this done. I'm using a very fine brush. It's called a pointer. And what it is a very long set of bristles. but very fine. It's maybe a ½ inch long, but very narrow. The problem with it is it's also very flexible. So you can't push down too hard without making the paint splatter. You got to be real careful. You still have to be very careful about how you extend the brush, how much paint you allow to come out. All right. I'm also going to go back to this area and put in some color there. I'm going to wait till that dries before I put any color in the letter open, or even the window for that matter, because you run the risk of having that color bleed into the black, and that's a mess. Terrible mess. This is going to be better. It's always a good idea. What I do is I always pencil everything first, and I have all my options laid out in front of me. Nothing's a mystery. Nothing's left for the last minute. People who don't paint out their idea, who don't pencil out their ideas, are doomed to failure. I know inspiration's great, but I'd rather err on the side of predestination, making sure you have too much information laid out in front of you as opposed to not enough. There we go. We got the corner in nicely. Beautiful. Let's get back to this little corner. Inside of here, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to darken it like crazy. Again, this pointer is very good for that purpose. I could very easily make a mistake and press down too hard. I'm not going to, because I really am careful, and I'm pretty good with this type of brush. I've had a lot of experience using this. I'm going to wait till it dries before I introduce the color into some of the light areas. I see the great thing about acrylics, they should dry in a moment or two. That's why when I do buildings like this, I do an acrylic as opposed to oil. Oil will take at least 2 or 3 hours to dry, if I'm lucky, if that were the case. But the good thing about oils, they would not really make such a big mess once you do, let's say if you did introduce another color. They would not necessarily dry quickly, but they wouldn't bleed. Acrylic, on the other hand, bleeds like crazy. It's a bloody mess. There we go. 1/2 of that is done. Let's get back to this at the second half. We're going to go back into the bottom, get that done. Now, I hope you realize exactly how much work I do on this, the detail. The bricks were a real, you laugh and you say there's a real rhyme and reason to the structure of the way they fall into place. You just don't plop them any way you want. You have to be very careful to make sure that you're adhering to what the builder did, actually, because he really did quite a lot of effort. The bricks weren't just plopped into place. He really thought about what they would look like from a distance. They might look like they're haphazard, but there's a lot of logic to this. No two bricks, well, some are in sequence. The basic red ones do fall into sequence, but he introduces a white brick every now and then. He introduces a black brick every now and then. And it's kind of neat to follow through with that pattern. It does come out to be a kind of a mosaic type of pattern. It's kind of fun. And you would might run the risk of saying, oh, what's the big deal? There is kind of a detail effect to it. Now I'm not really going to go too crazy about getting this Payne's Gray perfect. Like I said, I'm going to go make amendments to it with the color. I could always make changes as I go along. Let's get to the next part of this window. And that's this. We could actually work on the letter, the rest of the word open. But let's make sure we get this just right. Now we're going to go in here, do the rest. The trick is going to be now, really, this is all reflected metal paint. It's shiny. It's not just gray. And you might not notice it on camera, but if you look at it from a different perspective, there's kind of a shine to it. Kind of nice to it. And I'm using a special metallic paint. It does have a little bit of reflection to it. It's not overt, it's very subtle. Now, we're going to do the rest of the inside. Kind of tough to do without having a straight edge to act as a guide. I'm basically doing it all freehand. You think it's easy? You try it. Basically, I'm cheating because I'm letting my hand rest on the canvas. But it's still kind of a challenge to make sure you don't, if your hand doesn't wander and the line still remains true. Okay, we're doing pretty good. We're going to try to get the rest of the word in. What I'm going to do first is make sure the letter N is nice and intact, likewise the bottom. I'm going to go horizontal to make sure that I haven't made a mistake with it. Every now and then I have to make sure the paint hasn't dried. The studio lights play havoc with my palette. It dries on impact. You got hot lights, which really already my brush has dried, so I have to go back and clean it every now and then, make sure all the dry paint is not affecting the wet paint. Now, you're not going to see much of the letter E. That window kind of obscures most of it. I could put little bits of information to indicate that there is a letter there, but unfortunately it's not. It's going to have to be your imagination that supplies the bulk of it. Now, I think you pretty much could rationalize that if you see an OP, there's got to be an E between the rest of it. I'm going to make it really clean when I put the red in anyway. It's going to be evident. Let's get this all going. And to get back down to this. Back to the picture, we don't see anything. There's a little bit of light reflected. So we're going to make sure. I think I'll wait to the very end to put that light reflection in. No sense doing it now. Sometimes you could jump the gun, and reflections could be put in after. Now, I'm going to make sure the window, I'm going to use a nice reflective silver just like I do for the rest of it. I'm going to wait a while for the Payne's Gray to dry before I introduce a color on that. Shouldn't take more than 5 or 6 minutes. Now, we got the bulk of this window in. I have a lot of sections for the other part of the windows. A lot of that is simply gray, or silver, I should say. So we're getting down to the end of this episode. We got a couple minutes left. I want to get this window in. We're going to use a bigger brush to put some of the silver on the tone. Coming out really nice. I'm really happy with this. I'm going to use a broader brush to get some of the there's a big piece of metal that pops out, and believe it or not, that's kind of reflective silver. I'm glad I got that last window in. That's going to be great. It's stuff like that that really brings the bulk of the diner to fruition. It just makes it come to life. I have all the negative spaces done. And you laugh, but the negative spaces are almost as important as the positive spaces. They're ones your eyes catch almost first. It might not be something you really are aware of. It's a subliminal thing. But if you don't acknowledge it, if you don't make it aware to the viewer, if you don't... all right, anyway, I want to thank everybody for viewing. This has been a real pleasure working on the diner. It's always been a personal thing with me. And again, I want to thank everybody involved. Nutmeg has been very kind in allowing me to do this, and I think it's something the community will enjoy.